Hello and welcome to another episode of Save the Track Bike. I'm your host, Joshua. So, this is episode 11, and apparently I was reading somewhere that most podcasts don't even make it to the 10th episode, so this is a milestone, I guess. So thanks all of you guys for your support, and yeah, it's rad. Tell your friends about us, post about it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And on today's episode, I've got Angus Morton. So Angus is a road cyclist. He is a filmmaker. He has a podcast called Disc Breaks. And recently he decided to quote unquote retire from pro cycling. But this year he's coming back and he's racing the Red Hook Crit with Specialized Rocket Espresso. And so we talk about that. We talk about his films, Therabouts. We talk about his podcast. And then, yeah, we talk a little bit about a lot of stuff. So I hope you enjoy it. All right, so I'm here with Angus Morton, filmmaker, cyclist, podcaster. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm Gus. Angus. I'm an Australian living in America, and I ride bikes and, occasionally try and make a film.
Nice. So, yeah, you did the Therabout films. Do you want to talk about those a little bit? I'm a huge fan of those. So
thanks, man. I appreciate the support. My younger brother and I, Lachlan, have kind of done a series of films, I guess, called Therabouts, which are like, I guess, cycling documentaries about what riding means to us. I think is the essence of them, and our relationship with bike riding, and I guess trying to find like the root of our love of the sport, and overcoming a bunch of different different issues that we had with the sport, and hang-ups that we've had with the sport and bits and pieces like that. It was kind of born out of I had left the sport and was working in film and television, and was still looking for kind of like a creative outlet, I guess. And Lockie was in a similar boat, but in the world tour was kind of looking for, a way to express himself, and we sort of came together. He called me one day and said, "Do you want to go and ride across the country?" And I kind of hadn't touched a bike in many years and hadn't even thought about it. But when he said that, I was like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I want to go and meet real people and hear real stories, and document those. And I want to do it with my brother. And Lockie was the same way. And so off we went. And I guess, unknowingly, when we first set off on that journey, it kind of changed both of our lives quite dramatically, and ultimately led me back to the sport of cycling, and sitting here now on your podcast.
So yeah, we should. Let's go back to like how you and your brother got into cycling, or specifically you, since you're on the podcast. But
yeah, well, they're both linked, I guess. We grew up in the mid-north coast of New South Wales, Australia, which is, a town called Port Macquarie, halfway between Sydney and Brisbane, if anyone knows the east coast of Australia. So, quite a warm climate. We lived out in a farm, and my old man raced motor cars, was always into like motorbikes and that sort of stuff, and was quite competitive, I guess. So we started riding our bikes. We started riding push bikes at about 3, and I remember being like put onto a bike, and then my dad kind of like grabbing the handlebars and the saddle and like going, "Okay, you ready?" Like as soon as I let go, just pedal as hard as you can. And then like slingshotting me, like slingshotting me across the lawn, and I would just tumble over, and we kind of repeated that until eventually I could ride. And that was when I was quite young. And then it feels like almost immediately after I could ride a push bike, I had a motorbike. And so I would have only been 4 years of age, and I was on a motorbike, and we had a family that lived next door to us that had a couple of boys. One was a couple of years older than I was, and one was the same age. And I was super competitive with this older kid at like 4 years of age on this little motorbike, and so we started riding motorbikes, and you know, kind of with the plan of progressing into go-karts and whatever else. And I don't know, I guess when you start something so young, you don't, that apprehension and that fear, it doesn't manifest in your brain. And so I had no fear of speed and no comprehension of speed. And anyway, I was addicted to it. And at 6 years of age, 7 years of age, I was like, I'm going to be a Formula One driver. And after several pretty bad accidents on our motorbikes, my parents were like, okay, we're going to chill for a year. And this would have been when I was about 8, or about to be 8. And they sort of said, we're going to chill for a bit, and in 1 year's time, we'll get you a go-kart, and, you know, you can start racing go-karts. And I was like, hamstrung. I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe this is happening. Which is kind of funny to think, but I very distinctly remember being like, my dream is over at like 7 years of age.
Oh no.
And in my mind, the way that it plays out is I was sort of given that news, and then the following morning I walked past the television and there was an ad for the Tour de France, and they were going fast, like super fast. And I was like, wait a second, are they on their bikes? And yeah, they were. And I was like, man, they're going pretty quick. I was like, I reckon I could get a bit of a rush out of that. I reckon that's a good vibe. Like, not kidding, man. Like, I just saw this one ad. I'd never seen the Tour de France. Like, saw the ad, never watched the stage, never like engaged any further than that. And I just went downstairs, got my old mountain bike, and just went down the road. And without engaging any further, like in the professional side of sport or like following the sport at all, I just started riding my bike. And I was like, this is the fastest thing I can do. And so this is what I'm going to do all the time. And we lived on it's hard to explain. We like lived on kind of like an island that was like a dead end road in like an estuary, in like a river system. And so I would just ride up and down, do laps of the island, and then I slowly progressed further and further out. And Lockie and I were quite close. And so, of course, you know, he sort of followed, you know, relatively soon after I was doing it. He's like, well, I'll do it too. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. We happened to have a coach in our town. We had a guy in our town, Graham Sears, who was an Olympian in the 1980 Olympic Games. Really successful bike rider, both on the track and on the road, and just a great, just a funny dude. And he kind of recognised early on that we were pretty intense kids and pretty, you know, competitive. And so he sort of started to coach us, and from about 10 years of age, for about 10 years after that, he looked after us, and that was, it was awesome. It was a pretty interesting time. You know, I think I decided when I was 10 years of age or 11 years of age that I was going to be a bike rider, and that's what I was going to do for a living. And away we went.
That's awesome. That's funny because like I've had a lot of people on the podcast so far, and like none of them have given me the story about how they learned how to ride a bike. So that's cool to hear, because like I was about the same age. I would think I was about 3, and then I did my first BMX race when I was like 5. So
really?
Yeah. And like my dad grew up racing motocross. That was like his thing.
Gotcha.
So he tried to get me into motocross, but I broke my collarbone when I was like 6.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I think that
on the motorbike or
on the motorcycle. And then I pretty much focused, I think, on BMX until I was like 15. and then I got my license and, you know, gave up bikes for a long time. But
is there a big BMX scene here in the States?
You know, I grew up in Texas, and there's a huge BMX scene in Texas, or at least there was in the 90s. And I think there still is. But when I first moved to Colorado, there was one BMX track, and it kind of sucked. And because I moved to Colorado, my family moved here when I was 14.
Okay.
And from what I could tell, like, there wasn't that community really. So I kind of just did like dirt jumping and stuff when I first moved here, and I stopped racing. So I was about 14, 15.
Yeah.
And then, but now, I mean, I think there's like within like half an hour of where I live in Denver, like there's at least 3 BMX tracks that I know of. So I don't know if it's growing or what, but
yeah, that's interesting. Because I know in Australia, a lot of guys like Robbie McEwen's an ultimate example, but came through that BMX system. And I remember it was BMX and track. Like I remember when my family has no history of cycling. You know, we just very much like stumbled upon it, and we're just kind of feeling it out. And, you know, I remember going to like my first state championships at 11 years of age and racing against kids that had been on the track and on BMX since they were like 4 years of age, you know, like you're 11 and they've got 6 years of racing under their belt.
Yeah, totally.
It's just pretty funny, but so I never had that. Like when we kind of did it a slightly different way, but I'm intrigued by those guys because I remember at the time I was kind of jealous of them. I was like, man, these guys have got this head start on me. I'm a little bit pissed about that. but now looking back on it, it's kind of a funny thing, and I often wonder, like, I wonder if I would have lasted, you know, like past 12 years of age if I had have started racing my bike when I was like 5 or 6.
Yeah, I mean, I took it for granted, you know what I mean? I was just like, I think that I almost kind of regret it in some ways because I think I was in the expert class of the ABA at the time by the time I was in my age group when I was like 10 or something. And then I was in the expert class up until I was like 13. And then I remember I got like dropped down to intermediate, and then that was like really discouraging because I went up in age or whatever.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And then, you know, you're like 14 and you're like, oh man, I got to start over. And then
yeah, dude, I'm hearing you. Like, and I'm intrigued by that because, like, you know, I mean, of course, like I've you know, stopped and started several times in this sport throughout my life, and I remember my mum asking me not that long ago, actually. She was like, "What could have we done differently?" You know, like, which is kind of a funny thing. Like,
yeah.
But she was sort of like, you know, like, well, yeah, what should we done? And I was like, well, look, to be honest, I've got no idea. Like, because we never had any pressure. The pressure came from ourselves, from us, like as kids, just being super competitive, and that sort of made me think. And a lot of people ask me, "Oh, what do I do? What do I need to do to become a professional? Or what's your advice?" Or that sort of stuff. And it's kind of torn because obviously, you know, if you start riding a bike at 4 years of age, physiologically, excuse me, you're going to have benefits. You know, you're growing up on the machine, like you're going to adapt and have so much more efficiency on that machine. But the counteraction of that is that, like, will you be sick of it by the time you're 12? And so, yeah, I'm intrigued to hear, you know, like people who start riding it at such a young age and are able to continue it or whatever. And look, to be honest, like, I don't know, there's no answer. There's no right answer. Like, I'm not really sure how to do it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like, everyone's different and has different experiences. Because I was just talking to, like, Kira McVitie.
Yeah.
So I was just talking to her for my last episode that just came out. And then, you know, she started racing when she was 12. You know, now she's 22 and, you know, she's, like, killing it at Red Hook. She had a rough season last year with her, like, first pro road season, but yeah, she still seems to have that, like, passion and like grew up around cycling, and her parents were cyclists and all that stuff. And that's just so different than my experience and sounding like way different from yours. So it's always interesting to kind of hear people's backgrounds.
Yeah, totally. And exactly, like you know, for every success story, there's a failure story from the same, you know, that are born from the same bush, and then vice versa, you know, for every story, like, well, that person didn't succeed. There's, you know, that grew up differently. Someone comes out of it, it's good, you know. Like, there's plenty of bike riders who have started racing in their 20s. You know, Richie Port is a perfect example of a guy who, you know, like kind of came out of nowhere in his 20s and like phenomenal athlete. Like, absolutely incredible athlete, you know, one of the absolute best in the world. And, you know, he did it completely differently to what the handbook says. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's one of those things where the biggest indicator of, well, I think, you know, it's all about your head. You know, it's a hard sport and it requires a lot of you on any level. And I mean, it's like anything. And if you can enjoy it and maintain that joy, then I feel like you'll be good at it, regardless of your physiology. Like, you speak to a lot of people and they're like, oh, well, you know, in the end it boils down to talent and all of that. But you're like, well, it doesn't though. You know, like, if you have, I mean, obviously talent plays a role in it, but that's like, you know, that's not the first hurdle that you have to jump across. You know, you have to actually enjoy the sport and have to be happy doing it and be able to, like, you know, be into it, because it requires so much of you. And then, you know, maybe that last 5%, yeah, well, if you were born with the genes, but you can get pretty far just by being into it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you see, like, I mean, you're coming into, which is why you're on the show, right? You're coming into the fixed gear world.
Yeah, I am.
And we'll get to that in a second. But, you know, like, that world is like notorious for people that are like from so many different backgrounds. Like, you have people that are like bike messengers. You have now like, you know, road pros, track pros, like all this stuff that are coming to it. And you have these like messengers, like keeping up in the pack with people that have been, you know, road racers for forever. So
yeah, which is, I think, that's a very, like, that's something that's really awesome. And what draws me to this part of the sport is that, so, like, I feel like now there's that X factor I hate that expression, but, you know, like the unknown, like the mystique of like what it takes to be good doesn't exist anymore, you know, because we can monitor everything. We're so, you know, we're so technologically advanced that we can monitor, like, you know, the level of blood ketones. You know, we can work out how much carbohydrate versus fat we're using at any given heart rate. And it's super easy to do. You know, I can go down to the local uni here and do a test and ascertain that. I can put a ultrasound on my legs and work out my glycogen levels, you know, what the saturation is. And so, like, it's just removed all of the beauty of it. You know, it's also controlled now. And so, and the way in which, you know, as soon as you essentially, like, you put a climb in a race or you make something that's purely physiological, then you're going to get, you know, a prescribed result, like a result that you just have to look like. You may as well just write down everybody's numbers at the beginning of the stage, how much they weigh, what their threshold is, and you'll know the answer to the end of the race. I mean, it's slightly more complicated than that, but, you know, it's not that much more complicated than that. And that's where I feel, you know, it's not becoming a sport anymore at that professional level. It's becoming an experiment.
Yeah.
You know, like, how can we tweak someone's training in order to get more benefit and a slight advantage? And as opposed to it being like, well, this person's just an athlete. This person's like I can't explain it. They're a freak of nature. You know, they're brilliant. And I feel like in that fixed gear world, because it's burgeoning and there is this mixture of different, I guess, different backgrounds within it, you know, I feel like that plays a big role in it. And also because it is grassroots and there is a community surrounding it, and there is, you know, so many different factors that I think you can be good and you can be successful in that sport, and you can take, you can take great satisfaction from it in more ways than you can, from the road professional side, I guess.
Yeah, I see that really happening too, like with the growth of like Red Hook and stuff, and then also with the growth of like gravel racing. I feel like people are craving that kind of more grassroots, like just fucking get on your bike and push as hard as you can.
Dude, I'm 100% with you on that. Like I have a big belief that, it's shifting now. And people, instead of being fans of a sport, like and having their heroes, they're like, no, I want to be a part of something myself, and not because I want to win or because I want to be famous. It's like, no, I just want to I want to challenge myself. I kind of want to take myself to a place that I haven't been yet, and that's what I want out of my sport. And I'm more drawn to that than I am drawn to like some formulated, systematic points system that I can, I go to my local crit and I start in category 4 and I accumulate the points to get to category 1. They're like, I don't give a fuck about that. I'm more interested in just seeing how far I can push myself and where I can take myself and in what environments. And, people are very much after, I feel like, and I guess it's with the oversaturation of technology and, all of this sort of stuff, they're kind of trying to find an escape and trying to find something that's like more real. I don't know, like it sounds quite cheesy, but
no, for real.
It's quite true though. Like I will 100% attest to it that, there is something that's special that happens to you when you really push yourself, and particularly when, it's not necessarily like to beat your best friend in a way that you can, or like beat the next guy in a way that you can be like, yeah, I smoked you, like I'm the best. It's more, in a way that's more like, yes, I got you this time. Yeah. Because last time you got me, or I don't know, or like I did a better time than I did last time, and I don't know. There's like the competitiveness is changing a little bit, and I think people's desire and desire for satisfaction is more complex and deeper than potentially it was before, or maybe people's desires to be a part of it instead of being a spectator, they want to be a participant now, and they're finding that there's more satisfaction in some of these other events. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it seems to be going that way.
Yeah, I think part of it is like maybe, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm thinking that maybe we're around the same age group.
28.
Yeah, so I'm 32. So
yeah,
close.
It's close enough, yeah.
So it's like I think our kind of generation and is kind of like changing from just being people that like, and this is like just a generalization, but there are a lot of studies about it where like people that are around our age group are kind of more interested in experiences rather than just, spending money on whatever.
Yeah. Or being like dominant.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've noticed that in myself. Like when I was a kid, I was brutal, man. Like I was a real asshole. I would win at all costs on everything that I thought mattered,
yeah.
And if I didn't win, like I would be cut up about it. Like I would be really offended, and I would become emotional and angry, and I would cry and all of these sort of things. And like it's interesting because returning to cycling, my motivations weren't necessarily to win. It was very much based around, I want to experience this. I want to experience this lifestyle. I want to experience, what it takes to be a professional cyclist and a professional athlete, and whether or not I have what it takes and how far I can take it. And I quite quickly realized that, like, when I got there and when I started racing, like, I was a bit of a square peg, in a round hole. Like, my motivations were more, I don't know, I just didn't have that competitiveness that I had before. I didn't want to like kill the next guy in order to win. I was kind of more interested in just being a part of it and kind of witnessing how certain people act and that sort of stuff. And I can't explain like why that happened, like it changed for me, you know, very much my desires and what I valued within the sport changed. And I think that was probably ultimately what led me to not being successful on my return to the sport. But I wouldn't necessarily change, like when I say successful, like I didn't have results necessarily, I didn't achieve the certain things that maybe I wanted to, but would I change that? Like, no, I feel like I'm far more grounded and happy being the way that I am. But it's interesting because you are seeing that as a more widespread thing now, you know, like most of my friends don't care about sport at that top level, but far more people are participating in physical activity than I remember as a kid, maybe, or interested in it than I remember, like, you know, 10 years ago. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers or anything like that, so I can't necessarily speak factually on that. But I don't know what it is. I don't know how to explain it, but it seems to be that's the way it's going.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot too. So let's talk a little bit about your history as a cyclist at the top level, or as a pro, or whatever in your career, and like how that panned out.
Yeah. Well, what do you want to know? Like stuff.
I mean, that's a lot.
Like, it's kind of it's sort of weird for me. It's not weird, but like I kind of had these two disjointed periods as a professional. Do you want me to start from the first one?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So like,
because what I want to do with this is like kind of talk about, because I haven't had anyone on the show yet that is coming to like the fixed gear racing world from the road world, you know, that hasn't already done it. So I'm kind of like, you know, get that arc in there.
No. Well, I should start by, so in Australia, so I was, like, I started winning state titles. Like I said earlier, I decided I was going to be professional when I was like 10 or 11 years of age. And very much like that was my life from that age. You know, I didn't care about school, you know, like if having friends was convenient, I would have them, but if it became inconvenient, like I didn't care. It was like all about the bike. And, you know, to the point where like at 13 years of age, I was doing, you know, physiological testing and working with, you know, a Spanish coach. And then I was traveling to the US to do altitude training camps at the age of 14. And I mean, it's probably not quite as dramatic as that sounds in the way that it worked in our intentions behind it, but that's how it kind of it was. And so I was very much obsessed with it. And part of the program, in order to become successful at the time in Australia, was you had to be part of the track program. And I hated the track. You know, I didn't want anything to do with it. I raced on it. I enjoyed the Madison. I raced the Pursuit, Teams Pursuit, that sort of stuff. Like I got quite into that, and I mean, I got a couple of national medals and bits and pieces, like going through the ages. But I was going through that age group with like Cam Meyer and Travis Meyer and Jack Bobridge and Lee Howard. You know, these like superstar track athletes, and same on the road. We were kind of coming up, and we were all so competitive. And it's interesting now that, you know, I mean, I guess Cam Meyer's surviving at that top level, but no one else is. None of those guys that were kind of at that level when we were kids are there anymore. But the point is, like, what I find is interesting about me now ending up, I guess, racing fixed gear is like there was a long period of time where I was like, I hate this. I don't want to race. Like, I don't want to race the track. I don't want to be involved in this. So anyway, I at the age of 18, I'd kind of been to Junior Worlds and done that and had a few ups and downs surrounding that. And the Drapac team kind of came. They'd been kind of courting me. I don't know, like I'd stagiated for them, and we were kind of talking. And essentially, I signed my first pro contract as a junior with that team, and I went there which was awesome because part of their program at that time was they wanted me to enroll in university and study part-time and you know, further my education in case, well, ultimately when I, in my career, you know, so it could help me transition out into a job. And I'd been homeschooled for the last few years because I got kicked out of school for missing too much of school because I'd been away racing at the World Championships and in the States and bits and pieces. So like my school kind of kicked me out. And so I'd been homeschooled. So it was kind of weird. I became like, I was very isolated and whatever. And so I signed my first pro contract and kicked things off at the Tour of Qatar. And I remember I was racing and there was, his name escapes me, but there was a guy there who turned pro the year I was born. And we were racing together. And there was one day in particular I remember where it, like, Tour of Qatar is crazy windy and it echelons out. And it's kind of like you kind of get in this hierarchy and you're getting dropped. It's very funny. It happens a lot in pro cycling. Like any race you do, you kind of get dropped with the same people because, you know, there's obviously everyone's at similar, like the people that are at similar levels are going to get dropped at the same time. And I remember getting dropped every single day with this dude who had turned pro when I was born. And so it was pretty weird. And that was kind of a funny thing. But anyway, I got quite sick. I got like a really bad parasite in my first year as a professional. And this is probably what ultimately led me to leaving the sport because I got really sick. I kind of started, because I couldn't ride my bike, I kind of got into uni and got into school and was like, oh, wow, there's this whole different world out there. And anyway, and when I came back, the very first day I got the green light to train properly again. I decided for some stupid reason to go downhill mountain biking on a ski slope in the summer, and I of course had a crash and shattered my shoulder and had to have surgery and all that sort of stuff. So it just became a hell of a year, and one of those things where you're just constantly coming back. And I was like, man, all these kids at school are having way more fun, you know, like they're out partying and they're out like they get to make movies and they get to do all this cool shit. Like, what the fuck am I doing riding my bike? Like, this is just constantly painful. And so the seed was kind of planted. And when I was sort of 19, I guess, and I continued on for 2 more years, went to Europe and I remember being in Europe and just being like, what am I doing here? Like, I hate this, you know? And yeah, I just pulled the plug. Like I was just like, they wanted me to, like, it was like, I'd signed a 3-year contract and they wanted me to renew my contract, and I was about to turn 21. It was the end of my contract at the end of that year, and I was just like, no, I'm done. And they were like, what? Okay, righto. And so I kind of, stopped. I've sort of told this story many times, I guess, but I was supposed to join my brother over at Slipstream, and told them like, nah, I'm not coming. I'm just going to go home. And so I went home and moved into film, I guess. So like that first part of my professional career, I guess, as you could probably very loosely call it, was kind of very up and down, and I guess it's spent with a lot of time like me growing up, like because we've been so involved and obsessed with the sport from such a young age, and I guess like being taken to and from races, whether it be with your parents or the state or national team and whatever. And then when I finally kind of became an adult and it was like up to me, I could kind of make decisions. I was sort of like, oh shit, do I really want to do this? What am I doing? And so I was very flippant, and I guess I didn't necessarily ride that well, or I wasn't that focused. And ultimately, I quit in I forget what year it was, like 2010, I guess, end of 2010.
Okay.
And went and studied film. I was studying film, and so I went and did that full time, and then it ultimately ended up doing that for a period of time.
That's awesome. I'm also a film person as well, so
yeah.
I went to school for filmmaking and stuff, and I still make films, but I don't know, have that parallel as well.
Yeah, nice.
So
it's beautiful. Film is a beautiful thing.
I love it. Like, honestly, like in my late teens, early 20s, like I kind of wasn't really doing anything and got obsessed with like films. And like I think that they like kind of opened my mind to like a lot of different things. And like I think that between like film, music, and like my bike, that those are like the three things that like helped me make it to at least the age I'm at.
I'm with you on that. Like it's I found that like I hated school. I never like I just never got the hang of it. Same. And I guess it was just because like I hated the fact that teachers would tell me what to do. I have a big issue with authority.
Dude, me too. And I had the biggest problem listening to teachers. I'd be like, who the fuck are you?
Like all would be going fine. Everything would be fine until the teacher would be like, I feel like you can do better. And you're like, do you know what? Fuck you.
Yeah, right.
And you're like, you think I can do better? You're like, you look how bad I can go. Like, it was just a competition. I don't know. And I did that, and I think back to it. I'm like, what are you thinking, man? You made your life so much harder by doing that. Anyway, that's what I would do. And I feel like film was one of those things where, like, if I wanted to go and see, like, I felt like it was something that I could go and see, like, all of the extremes of the human condition.
Yeah.
And, like, not be judged or, like, not be necessarily told, like, what I should or shouldn't like or what I should and should watch. And so that's what I feel like I learned a lot and became fascinated by the ability to be able to go and see, like the extreme spectrum of human emotion and human condition and, like, human personality.
Yeah.
And just be able to do it in my own time and be told it by these people that were, by directors and producers that shared, all that I felt shared, like, similar worldviews to me. And that's what kind of really, that's what I really liked about it, was that, like, I first got into film because I was, I traveled a lot racing and you meet people, obviously, and you'd be in Japan and you would meet a Japanese man or a Japanese woman and they would start talking to you and you're like, man, your life is, for me, it's completely like it's incomprehensible, because I can't imagine what it's like to live here. I'm not from here. I can't, imagine what it's like. Like, not in, and I don't mean in like a traumatic way or anything. I just mean like I can't put myself in your shoes. Like, it's blowing my mind. And this was happening. You're going to the Middle East and you're going to Southeast Asia and you're going to Europe and Northern Europe and everywhere, America. And I was like, man, there's all these like crazy, interesting people around, like everywhere, like this is a normal dude. And so I was like, I want to go and make documentary. And then from documentary, I was like, wait, I don't even have to find the real person. I don't even have to find real people. I can just make these stories up. I can just make universes up. And that's kind of ultimately what led me towards fiction, which I guess I was doing scripted comedy before I ultimately came back to cycling. But that's kind of where I was headed, was I wanted to go into drama and that fiction world, because I was like, you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can create this whole world. Like, it doesn't have to be based in fact at all.
I honestly remember seeing, like, I think the first Godard film I ever saw. And, like, I grew up listening to, like, punk and hardcore and all that stuff. And I was like, dude, this movie is, like, punk as fuck.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was. I don't remember if it was Breathless or if it was one of the later ones. No, I think the first one I saw was Masculine Feminine, if you've seen that. I don't know.
I think I know, yeah.
Yeah, that movie I was like, oh, this is, like, the origins of, like, that fuck you attitude.
Yeah.
Because he's just like, I'm going to make whatever movie I want. And then I, like, came across all these, like, super low budget films and stuff. And I was just like, oh, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting. One of my friends from high school who is, like, best friends with a bunch of my friends, like, her band was on Jimmy Kimmel the other night.
No shit.
Yeah, and just, like, that's seeing sick. That, and then, like, one of my friends is, like, producing a show on CNN, like, another kid I was friends with in that same crowd. And they both moved out to LA, and like, you know, everybody's like, oh, sure, you're going to do like, you know, the move to LA and whatever. I don't know. And then now they're both doing this stuff, and you're just like, it's about doing it, and it's about putting yourself out there and doing the thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, exactly. It's about biting the bullet.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I felt like, yeah, like, I mean, like, I hear that phrase. I'm someone who like acts very impulsively.
Yeah.
On things. Like, I think things through, but like, so, you know, like you might put an idea into my head and you're like, do you know what? That actually sounds like a really good idea. I'm going to like dedicate 100% of my life to like making that happen, or seeing if I want that, you know, like I'll just go all in on things. And I feel like that can like, I don't know, can like lead you, you're exactly right. Like it leads you to do things.
Yeah.
And irrespective if they end up the way they are, like at least you're doing something, at least you're like behind it, as opposed to being like, well, the reality of me succeeding in that is like pretty low. Or it's like, oh, well, all the issues in like me getting there, you know, it's too much. The risk is too high or whatever. And I mean, maybe that becomes from being an athlete and like having traveled most of my life, that like I don't feel like I really have like a home city that I'm attached to, or a place that I'm attached to. So like moving around is easy, and like committing to things is kind of easy maybe. But like, yeah, I feel like if you just do it, a lot of the time, if you just do it and work hard, like you get there.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, that's like, who else is going to do the job? Like someone's got to do it.
For sure.
You know, why can't it be you?
Yeah.
Just go and do it. You know.
Yeah. So what have you been listening to like while you're training and stuff right now?
Okay. So 2 bands have been like big in they've been my go-tos at the moment. And it's funny because like we just did like a Disc Breaks podcast, and Emily May talks about like going back to a go-to album. And when you travel a lot, you know, there's always that come down, like you're flying home and you realize like you're alone. You know, it's kind of that moment where like all of the kerfuffle around a race, all of the excitement, all of the intensity is gone, and that fatigue sets in. You're like, oh my God, I'm going back to my normal life. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And so you have these albums that you go back to, and they change obviously over time. And I've very much in the last few weeks, I've been having those. Like, I've been very much using the bike as an escape from like just reality, I guess, in the last few weeks. Anyway, so 2 bands, a young LA guy who goes by the name of Gold Star, and he has 2 albums. And so I've been listening to him. I've been listening to those albums on repeat.
Nice.
And then he's awesome. Like he's country blues. And yeah, I cannot speak more highly of him.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds good. I like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like exactly. If you like a bit of rock and roll, like a little bit more bluesy country, then you'll be good with that. And then the other band, which is kind of taken me a little bit out of, just kind of come at me a little bit out of nowhere, but The Horrors.
Nice.
And The Horrors' most recent album. And so, like, for me, The Horrors have matched my musical taste identically, their progression. Like, I remember discovering them in 2003, 2004, when they were, like, gothic punk, you know, like this very loud, very angry music. And I was very much into that at the time. And then as they've gone on, you know, they've kind of moved from being this angry gothic punk to like, you know, slightly more like new wave, and then it's progressed from new wave into like psychedelic kind of, and it's progressed from psychedelic into like psychedelic electronica. And I followed their progression very much. My musical tastes have matched it until the album, the album just before this one, which was called Higher, or I can't think of the name anyway. But anyway, they just released their most recent album, and it's called Machine or something like that. And the first track, I heard it months ago, and I was like, no, I don't like it. I don't like The Horrors anymore. And then I went back to it for some reason, and holy fuck, I can't stop listening to it. Like,
I love when that happens.
Dude, it's like the first time in years that I've like put an album on, played it through, started it again, and like played it through again. Like I've had a couple of times where I've like played the album twice in a row. So anyway, for whatever reason, so those are the two albums: The Horrors, most recent one, and Gold Star.
Nice. This isn't when I'm training, but lately when I'm like climbing, I've been obsessed with listening to Brian Eno, music for airports, just like that dreamy ambient, like escape everything kind of. Me and a group of guys are talking about doing Mount Evans on fixed gear bikes this summer.
Some dudes did that.
Yeah, we're gonna do it.
That's bold. That's a bold move.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We're gonna do it, and then that's gonna be, I think, my album.
Keep me in the loop on that.
Yeah,
because if I'm able to get there, I would love to do that.
So, is there anything you want to say before we head out?
No, I'm good, man.
You wanna send people out to your social media, to Disc Breaks, all that stuff? Yeah,
I guess. Hit up Disc Breaks at Disc Breaks or discbreaks.com and do some reading.
Yeah, go read.
Exactly. The interviews are like, they're legit. They're really, really good. Like people like the Schneider sisters, like Cassie and Niuya, like, even Taylor Finney, like Mike Woods I was speaking about, Tom Southland, like Christian House. All these people who are my heroes, people that I like have a huge amount of respect for. And they've done these really big, in-depth interviews, about stuff that they're not normally interviewed about. And I think that, if you like music and you're also interested in like human story, go there and read them, like, because it's fascinating. I mean, I'm fascinated by it, like, because I don't know, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah,
it's one of those things. Like, I'm not blowing my own horn. Like, I did fuck all to like make them good. It was just the people that answered the questions, and they answered them in really honest ways, and it's been great. So go check it out. And
I'll put a link to Disc Breaks in the show notes and to Therabouts.
Appreciate that.
So
and everyone keep an eye on Therabouts. Like, I can't speak directly about what we're about to do because we've got to wait like a couple of weeks or something or other. But yeah, we're going to do some really cool stuff. A lot more stuff coming out this year. And I think we're going to see Therabouts like reach its peak. It's reached its true potential, so we'll see.
Fuck yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, Angus, for doing this.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no worries.
All right, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Save the Track Bike. Thanks again for tuning in. It's really rad. Yeah, you guys are great. Anyway, whatever. So today's episode was produced by David Draper. The music was by Vitamin Pets. Thanks to O-Wheelie Bike Shop. And keep an eye out for next week's episode with Levi Blue. Now go ride your bike, whatever bike, wherever.